Welcome to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. Tom Friedman, in a recent New York Times editorial, described the Israeli elections as bringing together the most far right coalition in its history. It included some outright racist, anti-Arab Jewish extremists once deemed completely outside the norms and boundaries of Israeli politics. The Jerusalem Post described a key member of the alliance, Itamar Ben-Gvir, as the modern Israeli version of an American white supremacist and a European fascist. He'll probably become head of Israel's police forces. Friedman mused that as this previously unthinkable reality takes hold, a fundamental question will challenge synagogues in America and across the globe. Do I support this Israel or not support it? The Israel we knew is gone. A few days later, in a letter to the Times, Joshua Davidson, senior rabbi at New York's Temple Emmanuel, responded to Friedman's question by saying it represents a troublesome equation of Israel's government with the nation itself. One can protest the policies of the government and still support the nation. The strength of the diaspora Jewish community ties with Israel must transcend the politics of the moment, especially at a time of heightened incidents and expressions of antisemitism around the world. Israel is more than its government, he argues. I'm blessed and thrilled to welcome to the Radical Imagination today two of the brightest, most articulate, and energetic young rabbis in America today who are vigorous voices for a renewal of Judaism and an expansive vision of the Jewish American community. Rabbis Joshua Franklin and Joshua Stanton are the spiritual leaders of two of the most prominent synagogues in the New York area. Rabbi Franklin is the senior rabbi of the Jewish Center of the Hamptons, and Rabbi Stanton is the spiritual co-leader of East End Temple in Manhattan. Rabbi Franklin has long been involved in local Jewish and ecumenical causes in East Hampton, including the Plain Sight Project, which has been documenting the existence of slavery in the Hamptons, Long Island, and New England. In April, he traveled with a delegation of 25 American and Israeli rabbis to the Polish-Ukrainian border on a mission trip to actively assist Ukrainian Jews and others who have fled the Russian invasion. Rabbi Stanton is the author of the critically acclaimed book, Awakenings, American Jewish Transformation in Identity, Leadership, and Belonging. He's a senior fellow at the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, has appeared on numerous cable news outlets, including CNN, CNBC, and CBS, and his work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the Daily Beast, the Jerusalem Post, in documentaries in the international media in over a dozen languages. So thank you so very much, Rabbis Franklin and Rabbis Stanton, for being here on the Radical Imagination. It really is a joy and a blessing to have you, and we just love having you both here today in this moment of real soul searching, isn't it, for America, for the world, and of course the American Jewish community.
Thanks so much for having us, Jim.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive in. Let's start with, and I did read your book.
I'm so sorry.
It was really terrific, highly recommended. And I'd like to start with a question there to get us going. Many of those cast to the margins you put forward in your first chapter, I think it is. Many of those cast to the margins of the American diaspora hold the seeds of a new Jewish awakening. So I wonder what you mean by that. Tell the audience what you're trying to say.
I think it's a phenomenon as old as Jewish diasporas themselves. Cecil Roth, the remarkable historian, suggested that Jews contributed greatly to the societies of which they were a part, in large measure because they were on the outside and had unique perspectives and insights that those at the heart of society, those who had made it, those who were seen as core to that society, did not have. And we're finding a parallel phenomenon taking place in the American Jewish community today. People who are Jews by choice, people who are Jews of color, LGBTQ plus Jews, who for a long time have not been heard, have not been seen, have not been appreciated, are some of the folks coming up with the most amazing innovations in the American Jewish community today. And all we need to do is listen, empower, and watch the future unfold before us. I think the future of the American Jewish diaspora is remarkably bright. We just need to look to places that we have not done in the past generation or two in order to see it rising before us.
Well put, well put. I also wonder how that jives with the fact that so many young American Jews are having difficulty relating to their heritage. And you talk about that, don't you, in terms of, and I know Rabbi Franklin as well, how to create meaning, how to create purpose in this sense. And again, let me enlarge this to say what's going on in Israel here is so very, very important. And how do you respond, particularly to young American Jews who see what's going on there and who still want, of course, the safety and security of Israel, but are horribly dismayed at the way the Palestinians seem to be treated? And how do you relate to that? Because I don't hear as much as I would like to hear concerns in the American Jewish community of the rights of Palestinians as well, legal human rights that are going on. Anyway, okay, long question.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Rabbi Franklin, yes.
Yeah, well, yes, Rabbi Franklin.
Look, Israel's a democracy. It's a democracy like our democracy, except it's a very different kind of democracy because there's many more voices that are represented in not just Israeli society, but even in the Israeli Knesset and the Israeli parliament. Kavir's party represents only a very small minority of voices. Same with Netanyahu, although he's formed a coalition of the majority. The Israeli Knesset and Israeli society is not homogenous in the same way that American Jews and our Jewish communities aren't homogenous either. People often look at certain things that are going on in Israel and they want to actually disassociate from Israel altogether. They want to be non-Zionists or even anti-Zionists. And I would say find your voice in democracy, be a part of the conversation, because disassociating yourself from the conversation is really the worst way to actually make change and to create the kind of Israeli society that you want to see for the future and for our generation.
I wholeheartedly agree. And just building on Rabbi Franklin's point, you don't change a relationship by leaving a relationship. And what I'm concerned about is not even the set of voices that are very critical of Israel. It is the growing number of Jews, particularly young Jews, who seem indifferent to the relationship. And what I tell my conversion students, what I tell members of my community, is that I can't tell them what type of relationship it needs to be, but they need a relationship. And if they are struggling with it, it's a time to invest in that relationship, not divest from that relationship.
So are you more or less agreeing with Rabbi Donaldson of
Davidson?
Davidson, sorry. Yeah, excuse me. Of Temple Emmanuel, that you're separating the politics from the nation? Or are you more or less saying, or with Friedman, who is saying, wow, we have elements of fascism in this democracy, and we've really got to take into account what's going on there and really have an honest debate about the extent to which an authoritarian right has taken over this culture and the politics?
It sounds like, you can replace the word Israeli with American quite often, and that we
Yeah,
have fascist elements in our society as well. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. In fact, you become a part of the American experiment in democracy and you vote. You become involved. And as Rabbi Stanton was saying, you invest in a relationship that you feel comfortable with, but you don't divest from the relationship and just walk away. I mean, I can't imagine as an American saying, you know what? I don't like our government. I'm
yeah.
done. I say, I don't really like our government. I'm going to get involved and rally people and really take advantage that we live in a system where democracy is valued and our voices are valued. And I'm going to speak up and I'm going to find people who are like me that are going to get together and be a part of making the kind of change that we want to see in this world and in this country.
I also wonder if Rabbi Davidson and esteemed journalist Tom Friedman are not saying entirely incompatible things. I am deeply troubled by the composition of the incoming government in the Knesset. I think it is deeply problematic. I say this based on Jewish values. I say this based on a love of Israel. I am incredibly concerned. And we need to double down on the conversations with our Israeli counterparts. And we need to encourage more progressive movements in Israel to really take root so that there are new spiritual terms that Israelis themselves can engage with other than just secular or religious. And so I think Rabbi Davidson is reflecting a theory of change. Tom Friedman is reflecting a particular moment in Israel that is going to be difficult and is going to pose challenges to that theory of change.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with both of you. It's not about, loving or leaving it. I'm here, and there are deeply profound contradictions and conflicts here, but no, we've got to maintain our involvement. Last week I did a show with a very renowned progressive filmmaker, Israeli filmmaker, Barak Heyman. I don't know if you know him or his work, but he was saying whatever progressive voices out there in Israel, left of center, even center to left of center, are feeling totally isolated and very alone. And of course, he too is not giving up the cause at all. He's fighting within the system to challenge it. But so much of what is going on there too is, as I agree with you, Rabbi Franklin, happening as well in America. And I agree with your book also, Rabbi Stanton, that Jews have made enormous contributions to American life and culture and politics and finance and academics and so on and so on. Yet there is, I don't need to tell you, we just dodged a bullet here, I think, in the midterms. And we're still not out of the woods already as well. I mean, there are elements of a radical right that still threaten, an authoritarian right that threatens all of us in this country, not only Jews. And of course, as you all well know, historically, these sorts of governments and movements go after Jews. They tend to go after them maybe among the first people they go after, but it includes so many others, of course, as well. So isn't that part of the answer as we seek to awake, to form alliances and coalitions with other groups, as you were pointing out, Rabbi Stanton, who have not been heard from, and we need to have their narrative and to make connections to each other's feelings of frustration and loneliness, etc. And last point on this, I know again, another long question here, but I know we're going to get into it, but how does the monologue at Sunday Live last week reflect, with Dave Chappelle, reflect on some of the things we want to talk about here in this show?
So a couple of thoughts. First is that Israel might actually be a really helpful laboratory for creating a more pluralistic society in America. And I say this as one who brings dozens, if not 100, pastors to Israel and the West Bank every year to explore it as an incredible place filled with life, connected to our traditions, and that affirms that it's more complicated than we could possibly know. And one of the greatest challenges, I would submit, one of the underpinnings of extremism today is our acting with total certainty. And one of the core tenets of rabbinic Judaism is acknowledging with humility all that we as human beings don't know and cannot possibly know. And when we take Americans to Israel, such an ancient land, such a beautiful land, a land filled with complexity since long before our people was a people on that land, it enables them to gain perspective on their lives and their leadership here. And so what a blessing that Israel actually has the possibility to help us engage in pluralism in America and navigate pluralism in America. And so my hope is that more people will go to Israel to connect, to struggle, to grapple, and then to return to the United States with a keener knowledge of just how complicated human life is, history is, and society is. In addition to a false sense of certainty, we also are engaged in short-termism. And as we know as Jews, some things take a really long time. And that's true of democracy. That's true of rabbinic thought. That's true of social change. And we are so impatient and so certain of ourselves that we undercut that which is most important.
You want to respond to that?
I like everything that Rabbi Stanton said, and I wholeheartedly agree with him. But I think you didn't take the bait on your question about Dave Chappelle, and so maybe I'll take the bait for you on that one.
All right, there it is. I'm sorting it out.
You know, we sometimes expect our comedians to be advocates for social justice and social change, and I think that might be a little bit of an unfair expectation. Having said that, I was a little bit, and I had been disappointed a little bit by Dave Chappelle. I find him hilarious. I find him funny. I think comedians can be both funny and anti-Semitic, or both funny and racist at the same time. And, you know, one doesn't have to necessarily negate the other. But I was troubled by parts of the monologue. And I think the difference between, you know, a slight joke against the Jews, like where Dave Chappelle made a line of, I go to Brooklyn and they all look like Run DMC, all the Jews in Brooklyn. And that's funny. They're all wearing black hats.
Yeah.
But you know, the problem is when you make light of Kanye West's statement about going DEFCON 3 on the Jews, which is essentially about promoting violence against the Jews, and you say you'd laugh it off, and then you kind of even go down farther in that rabbit hole and not necessarily justify it, but make light of it. You can't, it's not healthy to support and condone violence against Jews. And I think Dave Chappelle wasn't saying that, wasn't supporting it, but he was tiptoeing around the line. And that's what comedians do. There's a line. They love to dance all over that line. Sometimes they cross it and sometimes they leap wildly over it. And I think Dave Chappelle was tiptoeing over it a little bit too much. Now, his opening line, he read a mock letter and said, this is what Kanye should have said. He said something along the lines of, I apologize wholeheartedly to the Jewish people, and I disavow anti-Semitism in all forms. And then it was gonna be funny, right? Because he's teeing up this joke, and he says, Kanye, that's how you buy more time. And you're like, buy more time? What kind of a punchline is that? That's what you should have said, Kanye. But you know, buy more time is essentially saying that the Jews are targeting you all the time, no matter what you say, and that he's making fun of the censorship that exists. And, you know, it was an opportunity for Dave Chappelle to be funny and to perhaps address Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And he was more funny and essentially exploring the same tropes as Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And that was what was a little bit disturbing. I'll also say that really the thing that I found most problematic with Dave Chappelle's humor was not actually at the SNL monologue, but it was from his last stand-up show, The Closer, where he did this entire bit The punchline was, it's called Space Jews. I'll kind of reverse the order of it. And that was the punchline, Space Jews, which is a funny sounding punchline, but he was describing a people who were radically oppressed and then go and oppress other people and don't really care about them and trample upon the same human rights that was done to them in the previous generation. And you call that Space Jews. And he's commenting on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the way that Israel treats the Palestinians without really fully saying it. And it wasn't really all that funny of a joke. And I was offended by that. That was unfunny and anti-Semitic, where I actually think a lot of his humor is perhaps off color and funny.
So you disagree with that statement that there is a certain amount of oppression going on with Israelis and Palestinians? I mean, is there an element of truth to what he's saying there?
He set up a narrative to essentially say that the Jews were an enslaved people, to use his language more accurately. The Jews were enslaved people who went through radical enslavement and torture and these horrors. And then once they got free, they enslaved other people. And that's not just not an accurate description of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it makes light of it in a way that is inappropriate. And on top of that, associates the Jewish plight or the Jewish experience with the Israeli experience and say all Jews are oppressors, as opposed to really focusing specifically on targeting your criticism towards Israel. It loops all American Jews into what he's criticizing, and that is not just unfair, but it's dangerous. Because then anyone who has issues with Israel is going to turn their anger towards the American Jews, which is precisely what we saw happen when there was an incursion in Gaza a few years ago. So I do take issue with that, and it creates violence, that kind of language and that kind of dialogue.
Okay, I'm pushing back a little on you with this. Doesn't the policies of the Israeli government create humiliation and shame and disrespect, which leads to more violence too? Isn't it time to start talking, about a two-state solution, or again, at the very least, some sort of autonomy for the Palestinian people?
I mean, personally, I'm for a two-state solution.
Right.
I'm for Palestinian human rights.
Right.
I do believe that there should be talks. I don't necessarily, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I do think that it's more complicated than simply saying, let's just do a two-state solution. Israel has, as of yet, really had a good partner in bringing about the kind of two-state solution, which I know so many of Israelis and so many Jews do support wholeheartedly.
If I might jump in for a second, first of all, just ditto to everything that Rabbi Franklin said. And I think the three of us might be some of the last people walking around saying we want a two-state solution in the United States. And I'm sure we're not alone, but it feels like there are far too few voices that are echoing these themes. And I also would agree that since the Intifada, military intervention in the West Bank has not been helpful as much as we would like. It's been, there has been an element of short-termism that I see in the way the occupation is conducted. And it's essential to have an occupation, apparently, according to international law, until there's actually a peace treaty of some sort. You cannot have sort of a no man's land of a place. Yeah. And so Israel is in a weird bind. The Palestinians are in an awful bind. Absolutely. There's a generational shift because there was this generation of Palestinians who were so hopeful that peace was possible. And the rising generation, which is a large percentage of the population in the West Bank and even more so in Gaza, did not know that time of relatively open borders and peace and real friendship and the Oslo Accords. And so it is a tragedy playing out before us. I think the Israeli government has a moral obligation to reduce suffering of Palestinians to the extent possible while ensuring the security of its citizens. I do not think it has lived up to that obligation. And I also think it is really, really in a difficult spot. And so it's a moment that repeatedly has led me to tears, a moment that is very complicated and devastating. And so one of the aspects that's important to raise up is you do not need to dislike Palestinians to care about Israel. It's actually very important that we grow in compassion and relationship to Palestinians. I think it is important for American Jews to go to the West Bank and see how difficult and complicated life is for ordinary Palestinians.
Absolutely.
And then I also think it's important to recognize just how difficult a geopolitical situation this is. And for the life of me, I can critique Israeli policy, and I have certain specific recommendations that I think matter a lot. It's not like I have a simple solution that I could pull out of a hat. If only Israel signed on this dotted line, everything would be fine. And that's the piece that has me most heartbroken, is that I don't have any easy solutions. I haven't heard of any easy solutions. And so the hope is that there can be incrementalism in a positive direction, and that there's still enough goodwill on the part of Israeli and Palestinian leaders. And I fear that there might not be nearly enough, at least at this particular moment.
Yeah. And I, well put. And what you were saying too, Rabbi Franklin, isn't in this, if you heard the last part of Chappelle's monologue, what did you think he was saying about, I love you to death to the audience, and my job is so difficult? What is he saying there? Isn't he trying to push the envelope? Isn't he going around the edges here and the lines and crossing some things sometimes in the hopes that we will be having this sort of dialogue and narrative change as we're having now? I mean, do you think that's part of what he's also trying to do? He's not just an entertainer there. He's a very, very smart guy. I thought, by the way, well, I should let you answer that first.
Look, I value free speech wholeheartedly, value free speech. And I also, looking at the things Dave Chappelle said, if you want to be in dialogue, the way to do that isn't to burn your bridges. And that's seemingly what he was doing. This wasn't a way to really engage in making change. This was really, I think, and dancing on a very dangerous line. And I think he did more harm than he did good with the monologue.
Burning bridges with who?
With the Jewish community.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen any positive responses from the Jewish community to his monologue. He wasn't calling out Kyrie Irving and Kanye West. He was saying they should have apologized, but they were right. They should have apologized, but what they were saying had credibility. And that's a problem. It's a major problem.
You know what I was going to say briefly? I found one of the most important parts of the monologue was when he called out Trump and called him an honest liar. And I thought that was a powerful couple of minutes there. If you remember that first debate that he had with Hillary. And here is this white billionaire coming out of privilege saying to the whole country, America is rigged. This is a rigged system. And this is the first time we've really heard that. An honest liar saying that. Now, he said too, and then Hillary said, well, here's a guy that doesn't pay his taxes. And he said, you know what? I don't, as much as possible. And that makes me smart. On the other hand, he came back with a powerful statement. And that is, if you want to get me to abide by the law better, change the tax laws. So you all and your donor classes also are starting to pay their fair share. Do you see what I'm saying? He's saying there's a certain moral, economic hypocrisy and bankruptcy that goes to the very, very core of American culture. And you have these, well, let me stop right there. What did you think about that?
Can I throw some gasoline on the fire by any chance? And this might be a moment that
go ahead.
I think one of the questions that I have not heard asked is why we are focusing so much more on Kyrie Irving and Dave Chappelle and Kanye West than we are on Tucker Carlson and the entire Breitbart team and Donald Trump, because right-wing white supremacist adjacent or actual white supremacists, in my mind, are doing more to normalize anti-Semitism and bring it to the mainstream than anyone else.
Absolutely.
I will say something even more inflammatory. I am not worried about AOC or Linda Sarsour posing a physical threat to my synagogue. I am terrified of white supremacists doing so. And so I think that as much as the anti-Semitism we're talking about this week is real, I wonder why it is getting more attention than Tucker Carlson's replacement theory, the ongoing Fox News dog whistles about George Soros reinvoking one of the most ancient Jewish conspiracy theories around, more than a president saying that there are good people on both sides, including literal neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
And so I just have to say, I'm wondering why it is that we are paying more attention to the anti-Semitism. And I do believe that anti-Semitism was expressed by Kyrie Irving, Kanye West, and Dave Chappelle. No question about it. Why are we paying more attention to their expressions of anti-Semitism than the expressions of anti-Semitism that come from people with far greater reach in far bigger offices and who happen to have a different level of melanin in their skin? And so I think that anti-Semitism is on full display this week. And I fear that we are also revealing the extent to which there is still a racial double standard, even insofar as it connects to anti-Semitism.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Reverend.
I would agree with Rabbi Stanton and disagree with him on another point. I agree with him that the focus shouldn't be entertainers and basketball players and rappers. That's not where the primary influence comes from in our country, and the media really should be held to a more critical standard, as Rabbi Stanton is saying. And our politicians as well, by the way, as Rabbi Stanton said. But I think it's a yes and in terms of anti-Semitism coming from both the right and the left. So yes, I would condemn what Tucker Carlson might say about blowing a dog whistle to unite the right. But I'd also actually I'm concerned about the boycott, divestment, sanction movement on the left, which for me might not, in theory, be anti-Semitic, but boycott, divestment, sanction movement, for those who might not know, is a movement to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel as a way to create social change, which for me is not and has never really been an effective way to produce social change or to produce political change within a country like Israel. So, for me, why target specifically Israel and not China and not Russia and not all the other countries that are oppressing people and violating human rights across the globe? Why target Israel specifically? For me, that has a specific anti-Semitic flavor, and I do find that problematic, and I do find it dangerous in many ways. So I would just say that it's not just the right, it is the left, and anti-Semitism comes in many forms. I'd also say that I take issue with the word anti-Semitism as the crux of a lot of the problems that we have with identifying it. That is, anti-Semitism was invented in the 19th century by an anti-Semite, self-described anti-Semite named Wilhelm Marr. And Wilhelm Marr created this term as a way of saying that Semitic languages like Hebrew, they're Jewish people, and there's a Semitic people who he was against. But he was referring specifically to the Jews, even though one might characterize Arabic people as Semitic people, which gave way for someone like Kyrie Irving to ignorantly say something along the lines of, my people come from a Semitic people as well, or anyone who might be of Arab origin might say, I'm a Semitic person and anti-Semitism affects me. It doesn't, because the way that anti-Semitism evolved, it evolved as a misnomer to specifically target Jews. It's why you'll find in the New York Times and in academic publications that anti-Semitism isn't spelled anti-Semitism, because Semitism isn't really a thing that you could be against. It's spelled anti-Semitism, all lowercase. But let me just say, that's confusing.
Yeah.
Very confusing. So what we should be doing is using a term that really people understand and is easily understood by every single person. And I would say, call it what it is. It's Jew hatred. And when we say that what's going on is Jew hatred, and it's targeting the Jewish people, people recognize much more quickly and much more easily and are able to internalize the damage that rhetoric and their actions might be causing.
Wouldn't you agree, though, historically, anti-Semitism has been much more of a right-wing issue? Yes, there's been anti-Semitism on the left. And would you also perhaps agree that the anti-Semite scholarly works that sort of turn personality on and on and on, and point out the anti-Semite has always been generally also anti-Black and patriarchal?
I wouldn't agree. I think anti-Semitism comes in the form of extremism.
Right.
And you see it in extreme right, extreme left, or extremism in any form. Yeah. But it's not a moderately held view, but you find it on the fringes, be it the fringes on the right or the fringes on the left.
And that's what perhaps you're trying to do, Rabbi Stanton, when you're talking about co-creating a new center. See that good segue there, right?
Well, so it's to be sure, I miss American exceptionalism when we did not have fringe movements on the extremes, and I rue the day that we said goodbye to a large centrist American politics. But I also mean a new center, a new network that comprises the core of American Jewish communal life. In the 1980s, 80 some odd percent of American Jews were connected to a synagogue or a federation. Today, that number on a good day is just north of 30%. Wow. And in any other industry, line of work, if you were getting 30% of your customers to come to your restaurant, if McDonald's was getting 30% of potential McDonald's customers, and of those, a huge percentage were only coming 1 or 2 or 3 times a year, a CEO of McDonald's would not make it very long. And in organized Jewish life, we're seeing a systemic decline. And around the edges, we are seeing incredible growth. 94% of American Jews are proud or very proud of being Jewish, even while that 30 some odd percent are connected to any institution of Jewish life. And what it means is there is tremendous upside potential if only we listen with care to the purposes, the animating purposes that American Jews have right now. And many of our institutions were intended to help us integrate as a large immigrant community. And they've succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. But you don't need to come to East End Temple or even the Jewish Center of the Hamptons to be both Jewish and American. So the integrative function that many synagogues and federations and JCCs played is not something that people need in quite the same way. And so once we surface the animating purposes of American Jews, and I would add potential American Jews and people connected to American Jews by way of family and friend and relationship, we can thrive once again. And so I'm very excited about that. I do love the connection that you're making between political center and religious center. I think there's much to be said about rebuilding both and the need for institutional transformation. And probably listening is the place to start in both arenas. I do look with optimism upon both American politics and American Jewry. And I think we're at a very important inflection point. And I thank my lucky stars that I think the inflection point is a good one, is a positive one, is getting us back on track.
You agree with that, Rabbi Franklin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the fabulous things about Rabbi Stanton's book is that he illustrates all the different ways that other, you mentioned 30% of Jews affiliate with synagogues, that other 70%, what are they doing? And Rabbi Stanton outlines a number of different Jewish organizations that you might not have heard of, or maybe you have heard of, but are engaging Jews beyond synagogue life deeply and meaningfully, so much so that really we might see Judaism or Jewish culture in a decline, but we might probably more accurately see it as a renaissance or a revolution that's currently taking place if we're just looking in the right places. So I commend Rabbi Stanton and also his co-author, Rabbi Benjamin Spratt, on a phenomenal book where they do justice to, I think, painting the American Jewish landscape, not just accurately, but in a way that gives me as a rabbi hope, and I know a lot of my community as well.
If I might turn it around for 1 second.
I was going to turn it around a little bit too, but go ahead. Yeah.
No. Come on. We are your guest. But I mean, I was just going to say, Rabbi Franklin at JCOH uses technology more effectively than any religious leader I know. And there is something amazing and special about this time of innovation coming out of COVID. And he has found a way not just to say, in his words, oh, you get a window in, you can live stream services. He has found a way to bring people so they feel like they are a part of services and study and key communal functions, even if they are geographically joining in a remote way. And that bears mentioning as a remarkable innovation that Jewish Center of the Hamptons is bringing forth, and Rabbi Franklin is. And you can see this even in synagogues and quote unquote legacy institutions. There are green shoots everywhere. Yeah. And that's very exciting.
I agree. And I have worked with Rabbi Franklin on bringing a couple of those green shoots and to the synagogue. We'll leave it at that. Wonderful events. And so, all right. I wonder, when you talk about institutional infrastructure and change, are you also talking about, I'm not trying to throw gasoline on the gasoline, are you familiar with this book, The American Jewish Philanthropic Complex? You are. Okay. Leila Berman, who is the Murray Friedman's Chair of American Jewish History at Temple University. Just briefly reading from the last chapter, how capitalism and private interest came to command authority over the public good in Jewish life and beyond. Not just Jewish philanthropy, but along with philanthropy generally and the tax laws that they've been pushing. It's not just Madoff characters. This has been a vehicle through which inequalities have been maintained and perpetuated. Okay, we don't have all that much time to talk about this, but I thought I would give you guys a chance to comment on. I'm glad that both of you know that book. So
I have not read it, admittedly.
Okay. Well, all right. What do you think about this? Is this the sort of institutional, whatever you want to call it here, quandary that we're in? It's not just la-di-da helping, settlement houses and so on. It may have had in the past, but this is a vehicle through which the rich get richer. And you're talking about power and the tax system, and which ironically our brother here, Brother Trump, also talks about. But anyway, why don't you comment on that?
I think that there is a pastoral role to be played at this moment, because what people are chasing is immortality. And that is something we can never attain. And at the same time, I've spoken to a lot of people who have made a fortune, and I've spoken to people who have lost a fortune. And one of the few things that can survive upturn and downturn and everything in between, not relationship as often as we would like, but very often philanthropic giving and the good that they do lives on after whatever enterprise or even them. And the challenge is that very often people are chasing this immortality, and we're not having real conversations about what it is to live for a limited time period and what people actually want to accomplish on earth. To be sure, there should be tax reform all over the place. There are tax loopholes many, that could be a conversation unto itself.
Absolutely.
But our role is pastoring people.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, our role is helping people, including those with means, live better lives and lives of purpose. And I think that some of the dysfunction in philanthropy that we do see is a failure of guidance that these individuals are receiving. And rabbis and others in key positions should step up and do better.
Do you actually talk to these people one-on-one? Some of the perhaps very wealthy people in your congregation. I mean, do you talk to them about this? And you do. And what do you say? What's the conversation like?
It's a conversation about meaning. I had a congregant who had an exit from a tech venture, and their stake was probably about $500 million. And they said, "What do we do now?" And I said, "Step one, don't buy or sell anything big for a year. Get a great financial advisor and have them handle your money, and don't make any big purchases. And step two, figure out the causes that you care about most in the world and spend a year figuring out how best you can address those causes. And step three, now that money is not an issue for you, how do you want to spend your time, the ultimate limited resource?" And so that was my counsel. Probably not perfect, but it was something.
And using Jewish prophetic ethics, correct? And same with you, Rabbi Franklin? Do you find yourself in conversation with someone?
I am. Look, one of the things that we do as rabbis is we help people perform what's called a mitzvah, a sacred obligation that they have. And one of the mitzvot is called tzedakah, righteous giving. And so when we enable someone to be able to give to a cause, Jewish cause, not Jewish cause, in an effective way that creates meaning in their lives and impact in the world around them, it's a sacred act and a sacred responsibility that rabbis have.
Absolutely. You know, we just have literally a couple minutes to go. I just want to throw this out briefly again, not to bring Dave Chappelle again, but more his imagery of the Jews. What was he trying to do there? And I want to bring in perhaps the term from the Jewish scriptures. People of God is a term used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to the Israelites. The people of God, the people of the Lord your God. It's also used the people of the Lord, my people. Hasn't that always been part of the Jewish experience, if you will, be seen as a collectivity as well? So help me understand that.
I think the insinuation of what Dave Chappelle was doing was not about insinuating, oh, those people of the book.
Okay.
He was insinuating, oh, the Jews, a cabal that exists that controls Hollywood. And that was the insinuation that he was making. Or let alone controls governments or whatever Jew-hating conspiracy theories exist within the world that he labeled also as, oh, you just have to say it's a coincidence because you can't say what you really mean. And
absolutely.
That's what he was referring to.
Josh, you had an amazing drush when I was with you out east this summer about the different names of Israel. We have all these people telling us, who Jews are. There were multiple definitions that you surfaced. Ivri, Israel. Can you refresh our memories? Because that was one of the most beautiful drushes I had heard.
I don't know if I could do it in such a short period of time, but we are called a lot of different names. Jews, Hebrews, Israelites, people of the book, whatever it is that you want to call us. And those might be accurate portrayals of who it is that we are. But to insinuate that there's a Jewish conspiracy in the world crosses a line that's no longer funny and becomes dangerous.
Absolutely.
And that's where Dave Chappelle was going.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but I just want to add, if he could have said it sort of like a Jackie Mason or a Larry David did, then we'd have something kinder and gentler and sweeter. But it's also talking about issues of power and the narration that you rabbis have to have as well with rich and powerful people. I'm so sorry. We could go on and on. This has been a delight and a joy and a blessing. You've awakened me. So thank you so very, very much. And I know you've awakened a lot of people in our audience, Jews and non-Jews. Bless you both. I hope to see you very, very soon. And thank you so very, very much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Jim, for having us.
Take care. Take care. And thank you all for listening to us today on The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vrettos. We'll see you again on The Radical Imagination.